This is Fat to Fierce. Welcome to the Confidence Chronicles. I'm your host, Amy English. Join me on this empowering adventure towards a healthier relationship with food, body, and self, one delicious bite at a time. Hello. In this episode of the Fat to Fierce podcast, we're going to talk about how to have your own back, especially when the doctor doesn't always know what's best. I'm talking about fat shaming in the medical fields because we all know that fat shaming is alive and well, even when it comes to our healthcare professionals. If you've ever experienced fat shaming from a doctor, nurse practitioner, what have you, just know that you're not alone. It is amazing how many of us, and I'm saying us, I'm including me in this because I did this for a long time. It's amazing how many of us avoid doctor's appointments and regular checkups just because we don't want to hear it. I was fat shamed for a very long time by a number of different doctors. It is an issue. And it comes up regularly when I'm working with clients. So it comes up in our coaching sessions. So it's important to bring this to light because it is still happening. I do tend to think some doctors have gotten better about this. Well, actually, I know that for a fact because I have found doctors who are better about this. I'm going to talk about that as we go on in this episode. But I want to bring it to light because I know for a fact that a lot of people continue to struggle with this and they're avoiding their regular appointments, their own health care because it's embarrassing and it's frustrating. And sometimes we don't want to hear it. Actually, most of the time, we don't want to hear it. We don't need to hear it. We understand. We're working on it, okay? It's not like we're, avoiding the topic entirely. In fact, most of the time, we're beating ourselves up enough about it. We don't need to hear it from our healthcare professionals as well. Okay. This is going in a different direction than I intended. So let me reel it in. I do have some notes that I'm going to be following for this episode. So bear with me here. Okay. It's important to bring this topic to light. And so today, what I'm going to do is share personal stories as examples of how to navigate fat shaming in or out of the doctor's office. And to kick things off, I'm going to start with one of my favorite quotes by Brene Brown, and that is, "Shame can't survive being spoken." I love that, and I'm going to use it as a guide throughout this episode. Okay. I'm going to share 3 separate personal stories from 3 different doctors, a former primary care doctor, a former OBGYN, and even a former pediatrician. Okay, these stories that I'm going to share with you today do take place after my cancer diagnosis, so after breast cancer, because at that point I had some life coaching skills under my belt, and so this is from like the last 10 years, okay? And what happened is if you've listened to any of the previous episodes in this podcast, then you've heard how I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And you may have heard how I gained 30 pounds within the first month of my cancer diagnosis. These specific stories that I'm going to share with you today take place after the cancer diagnosis and after treatment, actually, because that is when I started getting a lot of complaints about my weight. Not from my oncologist or my radiation doctors. Quite honestly, they never said a word. I think, when you're dealing with cancer, your oncologist and your radiologist realize there's bigger fish to fry. At least that's my guess. No. These complaints about my weight after treatment came from my primary care physician and my OBGYN. So here's the thing. Fat shaming is very familiar for me. I've been fat shamed by most of my doctors throughout my life, and a lot of that is because I never fit into the BMI chart ever. I mean, I don't even know as a kid I fit into the BMI chart. And there's a whole bunch of bullshit tied into that, which I'm not going to get into in this episode. But really, it's the fact that anyone still uses this is just beyond my understanding at this point, because it doesn't fit for most of us. So I never fit into the BMI chart. And there were always a lot of assumptions by my doctors. And that is that I must eat too much. I don't exercise enough. I'm not taking care of myself. When I dared to bring up stress eating in the past, I would get met with the comment, well, just don't eat it. Like, really? If I had $1 for every time someone said, well, just don't eat it. Okay, that's also maybe another story. Things that people say that aren't helpful, right? It was always the same message, though. Just eat less, move more. I once had a doctor tell me that I should be following an 800 a day calorie diet. Okay. Long story short, it's never helpful. It was never helpful. There was no compassion. There was no understanding. It was embarrassing and frustrating, as I mentioned earlier. And so that's the overall view of my past experience with most of my doctors. And so getting into the first story, this is about the time after I finished cancer treatment and I was going for a regular checkup with my primary care physician. And sure, listen, we celebrated that I had, just finished cancer treatment. It was great news. And then almost immediately she segued into, what are we going to do about your weight? And the moment she brought it up, I remember sitting in the office and just thinking, are you for real right now? I just finished cancer treatment. Like, I realize I gained a significant amount of weight during my treatment. Can you give me a minute? But no, she wanted to start pushing bariatric surgery. She thought it was an appropriate time to go for surgery to work on my weight. I was so uncomfortable. I was so frustrated. My body tensed. My defense mechanisms kicked into high gear and my inner rebel was standing by. Listen, if you're familiar with fat shaming in the medical world with any healthcare professional, you might recognize some of those feelings I just mentioned, right? I didn't ask to discuss this. And so instead of just having a normal checkup, here I was, fresh from cancer treatment, ready to fight my doctor, not really, but mentally in my head, about the reasons I wasn't going to have bariatric surgery. And there were a couple reasons. And for the record, I want to be crystal clear right now. I do not have an issue with bariatric surgery. I'm a firm believer that everyone must find whatever works for them. Okay. I have had plenty of clients who have worked with me before deciding to have surgery and after having surgery. And the reason why is because even after surgery, there are still urges to eat. Only they can't, right? Because the surgery prevents them from overeating, but those urges didn't go away. And that's one of the reasons I did not want to have surgery, was because, remember, I had an awakening when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I knew I was stress eating. I knew I needed to resolve that and heal my relationship with food. So at this doctor's appointment, I asked, how is surgery going to fix my habit of stress eating? Of course, she didn't want to discuss this, right? She really wanted me to have the surgery, deal with the food issues later, whatever. And I firmly said no. I firmly told her no. I'm not interested in having surgery. I want to heal my relationship with food. I want to fix this problem with stress eating. And quite frankly, I'm not about to put my body through a surgery, another surgery, this close after having surgery and treatment for breast cancer. It just was a hard no. And sadly, my doctor didn't respect that hard no. And so she flung the pamphlet. I'm not even exaggerating. She flung the pamphlet at me and left the room, the pamphlet on the surgery. Tossed it at me and left the room. That was the last time I saw her. I knew that this particular doctor was not going to support me. She was not interested in understanding more about my relationship with food and healing that, or healing stress eating, anything of that nature. She just wanted me to have the surgery, to take care of the problem, and remove the weight. So long story short, too late. I was able to find a doctor who was more supportive. But the whole point in sharing this story with you is that in that moment, in that doctor's office, when I gave a hard no, I trusted myself over the doctor. I reinforced my boundaries. And the lesson that I learned, which was so, so critical, is to always advocate for yourself and trust your gut. You don't have to do whatever the doctor says, especially if it doesn't feel right. And case in point, I have found a new doctor who is completely supportive. So it's clear to me different doctors have different opinions. So it's helpful and important to find someone, if possible, that you are aligned with. And as I mentioned, I'm not against surgery. That's not what this is about. I know plenty of people who have had successful weight loss surgeries and they're doing wonderful. I also know a lot of people who have had weight loss surgeries who are not. Again, it's important to find what works for you. My point in sharing this story is it's okay to set boundaries with a medical professional and be your own advocate and trust yourself and your instincts. It's hard. I get it, because we're kind of taught that doctors know best, right? And we should always listen to what they say. Especially when it comes to weight, there's so much bias and there's so much toxicity in our society about weight. And fat phobia is alive and well, and it exists in the medical community too. So, okay, let me move on, because I could really go on this for hours and we don't want to be here that long. So let me move on to story number 2 that I wanted to share with you today. And this was a visit with an OBGYN, again, post breast cancer experience. This one was a little bit more recent, within the last 7 years or so. I was meeting with a brand new OBGYN for the first time. And when I sat down with her, very first conversation, she asked if I would like to be prescribed Wellbutrin. And I asked her why. And her response to me was, well, people who are overweight and obese tend to have something going on inside. So I've prescribed Wellbutrin for a lot of my patients, and they're having a lot of luck losing weight. Okay. Can you tell this topic gets me a little heated? It does. Here's the thing. I'd never met this woman before. It was my very first time sitting down with her in her office. She knew nothing about me, my mental health, my history, my story, nothing. She didn't even know if weight was an issue for me. And she was about to prescribe a medication to fix the problem in her eyes. So what happened? Well, by this point, I'm a life coach. At this point, I'm pretty sure I had already created Fat to Fierce. I was already coaching women in this area, okay, on food and body confidence, emotional eating, all that good stuff, right? So I shared my occupation with her. I shared how I help women heal their relationship with food and how I help them feel comfortable in their skin and improve their overall body image and confidence and all that good stuff. I explained to her how weight loss alone rarely, if ever, solves the underlying issues. And neither does a pill, by the way. Let me tell you, I have never seen a doctor backpedal so fast in my life. If I wasn't so angry at the moment, in that moment, I would have laughed because it was almost comical. So as you can imagine, I never went back after that visit. And I ended up finding a new doctor, a new OBGYN who I absolutely loved. Never once made a comment about my weight. Oh my gosh, it was so refreshing. She was wonderful, but sadly she retired last year. And so now I'm back to the drawing board and have, to find a new OBGYN, but it is what it is. I've learned that there are better doctors out there, and sometimes it just takes time and effort. And listen, I know that it's not always a reality to interview doctors and find new one. I know that there's obstacles like location and access and insurance and all that stuff. I get that. But if it is possible to explore, to find someone who is more supportive, if I recommend that. And there's nothing wrong with interviewing your doctors, to make sure that it's a good fit and not going back if they've offended you by recommending medication when they know nothing about you. Okay. Third story, the pediatrician. This one was most surprising for me, and caught me most off guard. You'll understand why. We were at an appointment with my children. They're now teenagers, but at the time they were younger. And they used to go to the appointments together, one right after the other. It was just easy that way. And it was after, it was after the appointments, and we were sitting talking with the doctor, and this particular doctor informed me that both of their BMIs were a little bit higher than he'd like to see them. Again, with the damn BMI. Can we stop already? Okay, let me not go on a rant. So sitting in the office with my children, it was just me and the kids this particular day. My husband was actually in the car waiting for us. And the doctor, the pediatrician, proceeded to fat shame me and my children in the office. He immediately started talking about how we clearly weren't eating healthy. We needed to start making better choices. I mean, he just made a whole bunch of blind assumptions, didn't bother asking any questions, and really had zero understanding or compassion, or really zero interest in wanting to know more from us. He really just wanted to hear himself speak. I froze. I absolutely froze sitting in his office with my children. And it's because I was used to getting fat shamed from doctors, like me personally. I had never been fat shamed or weight shamed in front of my kids, and with the doctor, no less. And so in the moment, I didn't quite know what to do. It was like deer in headlights. And I just yesed him to death. I was like, okay, yeah. I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. And so in the moment, I didn't advocate for us. I did not advocate for me or my kids in the room when we were with him, but I was sure to share my feelings, my thoughts, my concerns afterwards. on the ride home. And the four of us ended up having a really long conversation on what wasn't right about that appointment. The fact that there were no questions asked, that there was no interest or any compassion whatsoever. And eventually, my children asked, hey, can we not see him again? And we both honored that request. And yeah, we found a new pediatrician. I'm extremely grateful that we've been able to switch doctors. But again, that's not what this episode is about. I know it's not always possible for everyone to be able to do that. This episode is not intended to be anti-doctor or switching doctor. It is about recognizing that even doctors don't understand or have compassion or even interest for the various reasons that we hold on to weight. And that is why it is so important, I believe, that we learn to have compassion and understanding for ourselves. And here's the thing. If you do want to make changes, like whether you decide to remove weight or not, it's entirely up to you. But if you do want to make changes, shame's never going to help. All shame does is keep you in the spiral, keep you beating yourself up over and over again. And listen, if you struggle with emotional eating, if you eat when you feel badly, then guess what? That shame makes you feel like crap. So it's going to keep the spiral with food moving, all right? Instead, what we want to do is focus on having some acceptance for ourselves. Have some understanding for yourself. One thing that I always would tell myself when I was beginning this journey was, you've had these habits with food for a long time. You've carried this extra weight for a really long time. It's not going to go away in a day. It's not going to go away in a month. Heck, it might take months. It might take years. How can I have my own back as I continue to move throughout this journey? Having your own back simply means starting to listen to yourself, having compassion and understanding, treating yourself better, talking to yourself with a kinder tone, being more of the supportive ally that you need for yourself rather than a jerk. Noticing the tone in which you're talking to yourself, the words you use when you're talking to yourself. Are you putting yourself down or propping yourself up? One fun exercise that I love to share with my clients is this. For every criticism, for every complaint that you share about yourself, so for every time you beat yourself up, every time you say something nasty, you criticize yourself, you have to offer yourself one compliment. So the next time you're standing, looking in front of the mirror, saying, you look terrible, find one thing that you like about you. It can be your eyebrows. It can be your nose. It can be your fingers. It can be your hair. It can be whatever. For every criticism, find one compliment. That's how you're going to start to build that kindness muscle. And that's how you're going to learn to have self-compassion for yourself. And with compassion, you have your own back. And here's the deal. Having your own back isn't just when you're at the doctor's office. This applies to every aspect and area of your life. Trust yourself before you trust others. This is part of becoming fierce. This is fierce. Having your own back, trusting yourself, being kind to yourself, treating yourself with more compassion as opposed to criticism, that's fierce. And that's Fat to Fierce. All Are you ready to take control of your eating, embrace your body, and boost your confidence? Then let's get fierce. Start your Fat to Fierce journey today. Go to amyenglishcc.com for more resources and to book your discovery call.